Hi, everyone. Welcome to workshop number 13 at the Educator Collaborative's gathering. My name is Brian Sweeney. I'm one of the consultants for the Educator Collaborative, and I'm happy to be here with Ryan Dunbar, who I used to teach with at the middle school level for a number of years, and he's been helping us out with tech all day. So if you've enjoyed some of the other sessions throughout the day, it's likely because Ryan was helping out. And we're here to talk to you about technology, collaboration, and writing. So our hashtag is the Ed Collab Gathering. So hashtag the Ed Collab Gathering, hashtag 13. And we are both tech people, which is why we're doing this presentation. So we would love it if you could tweet any questions to us or any comments, and we're both monitoring it. So anything you ask, we will answer, within reason. So I'm going to throw it over to Ryan, who is going to introduce for us kind of the problem that we want to tackle today.
All right, thanks.
Oh, yeah. Take over.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. So yes, my name's Ryan Dunbar, and I did work with Brian Sweeney in the past. We worked in middle schools together. Now we're both high school English teachers. And that's kind of the perspective we're taking some of the activities from today. But by no means does that mean that what we do today is limited solely to the high school English classroom. So what we're going to be talking about a little bit today is group work, collaborative work in your classroom. And the reality of the situation is that collaborative work is essential, but it's also something that is very difficult to do sometimes in your classroom for a variety of reasons. And two of the reasons that we had been discussing that were kind of major reasons were that you can't really hold your students as accountable as you'd like to, was definitely the first one. And Brian, do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is everybody kind of hates it in some way, like particularly the kids, because of the accountability issue. I've never had a group work project that I did without the technology we're going to describe that didn't end in some kind of trial. Like if there's 4 kids in the group, 2 of them are going to come to you very seriously to lay down the accusations, like I'm sorry to tell you this, but the other 2 didn't do anything, and I'm telling you now, when it's due today, and I want you to do something about it because you own justice and justice must be done. And like you feel like you've got to do something, but how do you do anything? Because you're going to bring in the other 2, and what are they going to say? They're going to say some other accusation at the other 2.
And meanwhile, those other 2 probably don't even know like half of the vocabulary used in the final presentation. And they hear group work and they're just pumped because that means they get to coast on the coattails of that really bright student. So I think that's something we've definitely all experienced. So we talked about that, like accountability, because of course, and we were talking, I remember, about like book clubs. We both used to use book clubs a lot in middle school, especially, just as one specific type. And as a teacher, you'd have all these book clubs going on. You could sit with one particular club, but there was no way you're holding the other clubs accountable during that time. So it would always be just a little bit cumbersome, and it doesn't really do it justice, as you were saying, Brian, right, by all the students. The other thing I think with group work was just a time issue. So you have accountability of time, because in one way, time is an issue because you only have X number of minutes during your class to work with your students. And there are a lot of things you have to do. So if you're spending a lot of that time organizing group work, sometimes it can feel like a little bit of a waste of time. And also time with regard to just having students be able to work together. So I know it's frustrating when the students have a lot of work to get done and then the bell rings and they didn't get half of it done, and now they have to wait until the next day's class to do more of that work.
Right. And I think, when you take these 2 issues, you start to look at it and say, like, is it worth it? And the kids would thank you, a lot of them. I mean, I know at my school, we're a lot of them are really great students, but sometimes a great student, oh, a lot of the time, a great student gets to be a great student because they know how to work on their own and they can get by on their own. So they'd be happy if you were just like, you know what, no more group work. And we would be happy because we don't have to deal with the trials anymore. But the truth of the matter is, like, this is a real thing they have to do. We are doing group work right now. Like all of us today are doing group work. This is a massive group work project, and it's part of our professional life. It's part of a teacher's professional life. There's very few professions where you're not engaging in some kind of group work. So the reality is we do have to prepare them for it, but it's very hard to do effectively if you're just kind of trusting everyone. And it's not like you want to be accountable because you want to, you know, get that student who's behaving badly and not being fair. You want to give them accountability because you're not just teaching them how to write an essay together. That will rarely happen, you know, out in the real world. But you want to teach them the process because it's the process that they'll be able to transfer to their professional lives.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I guess the question is, if it's kind of hard to do, the timing is hard to work out, but as we've established, we need to teach it. So where do we go from there?
Right. So I think for what we want to kind of do today is take group work, and in particular group work surrounding writing, and take that as our case study and focus on how we can weave technology into that process in order to solve our problem. But solving the problem is really the problem, because I think the way technology works, or the way a lot of us treat technology in schools, is we're always just looking for the miracle solution, you know, and we think that this app is going to come along, or this software is going to come along, or this thing that an administrator bought for us is going to come along, and it's going to be the magical cure for all of our ills. And that's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. And so what we want to do is take this group work problem, in particular surrounding writing, and go through the process of how we start to bring technology into it to solve our problem, but in, you know, staggered ways. So there's really 3 steps to our problem, or our solution. We know what we want to do. We want to add more accountability, or we want to add some features into the group work process. So the first thing we're going to see is, do we have a school district that we're teaching in where we have access to some kind of Cadillac, top-of-the-line education software that we can work into our teaching? If we don't have that, what do we do next? Do we go see if there's some free apps out there? And if there are, do they do everything we want? If they don't do everything we want, what do we do next? And so we'll work through that process, starting with the Cadillac. And Ryan's going to go through the Cadillac with us right now, which is, you know, this system he has at his school, and I'm starting to get used to at my school, but we don't have forever because it's a trial period, that can work really well. So Ryan, take it over.
Great. So my school is fortunate enough right now to have access to turnitin.com, and educators from around the world have heard about turnitin.com. A lot of classrooms are using it, and a lot of schools are fortunate enough to have access to it in their classroom. And when we think about turnitin.com, oftentimes we think about the plagiarism checker. And it's great for that. It will automatically compare a student's submission with every document that's on the internet, along with every document that's ever been submitted to Turnitin. So what you're left with is this great site that makes sure your students don't plagiarize. But that doesn't really help us as far as group work goes. And I think Turnitin gets so much attention as like an anti-plagiarism device that it doesn't get as much attention as it should as kind of a collaborative writing device. So I'm going to share with you really quickly here just a Turnitin.com screen. And what you'll notice is, in addition to assigning a paper assignment, Turnitin.com also allows you to assign a peer mark assignment. So right there, you can see they actually do provide a peer mark demo, which is great if you have the time to watch it. But I'll go through kind of the basics of it now and explain how Turnitin can really help collaborative writing in your classroom. So you assign the paragraph, or you assign the revision, and that's all pretty straightforward. You need to spend time with that. But here, what you do is, let's say you just want your students to revise each other's papers. Well, that's really straightforward. All you have to do is just papers automatically distributed by peer mark. You just put however many papers you want to force them to revise, and then you can track the revisions, then you put that number there. Now, on the other hand, if you want to try something like we're talking about, like a group project or collaborative writing, say history assignment, where each student is responsible for writing about a different aspect of a culture of a country or something, just throwing it off the top of my head, you can let the students select their papers and tell them that they have to then revise the other students in their group. So now what you're going to be able to do is you're going to solve both of those group work issues we were talking about. Number one, what's good is you're going to be able to make sure that they have time outside of class to be working on this. So they could do this at home. They could do this on the bus ride home if they have a smartphone. So it's really accessible. And it also helps hold them accountable. Because now the student that is not doing any revisions, I can see that right on the screen. It's tracked for me. I know that. And now I can hold him accountable for that work. So Turn It In is appreciated for what it does as far as originality goes. But I think as a peer revision piece of software, as you can see, there are a lot of benefits that if your school district has access to it are definitely worthwhile.
And I think, that's the larger point here, which is, we're not saying use Turnitin, go buy Turnitin. You can't do it if you don't have it for your school district. You can ask your administrators to look into it, and it's pretty expensive, but it's a top-of-the-line system that most districts get and then use exclusively for plagiarism checking. And the point that we're making is, if you have these top-of-the-line systems, see what else you can do with it. So Ryan is able to take that and not only check that they're, being honest with the work that they're submitting, but also now kind of jump into the peer review process. We can give them time in class to do peer revision, but sometimes that's not enough. And we can't monitor it all that effectively because it's happening in class and you're just one person. But if we can move it to this system that lets us see who's doing what and lets us kind of pass out papers, with some level of technological control, it makes the process that much better. But what do we do if we don't have the Cadillac? So we don't have the top of the line educational software out there. Our administration is not willing to pay for it because they can't possibly do it. But what's the next step? So this is the process for us. If we don't have that, where do we go to next? And we say, go out and check out what free apps are available for teachers, meaning there are all of these apps that exist for teachers. And even if they don't do everything that Turnitin does, some of them will kind of break down things you can do for collaborative writing into different component parts. So Ryan has this one that is, what is it, Boom Writer?
Yes, Boom Writer. Yeah, so let me show you a little bit about this this site that I found. So the challenge I was facing basically was that I wanted to do collaborative story creation with my students, really creative writing assignments with my students. Unfortunately, there were some limitations with my school based in curriculum, in that there's a really heavy tilt toward doing nonfiction essay writing and nonfiction writing in general. And that's great, but I wanted to make sure that they were still getting enough work as far as creative writing went. So what I did was I wanted to find something free, and I turned to the internet, turned to Twitter, and I was able to find this site called Boom Writer. So let me take you to just what a Boom Writer page looks like. But essentially, what Boom Writer is it's a site where students can collaboratively write stories. So what you do is you present students with a story lead, and then each student logs in and writes the next chapter of the story. So they all create and submit the next chapter. And then what you're seeing on the screen now is what I see as a teacher after they submit. And I just blocked out Sam's name, but this is what Sam was writing. And what I'll do is I'll read through it, and it's a nice feature because now I can look at this and I can make edits. and I could send him tips. So for example, in that first sentence right away, Sam's killing me. Sam said, Brad, continue. It's like I haven't taught him anything yet. It should be Brad continued. So I can send him that message, that note, and then he has to make that correction before we move forward. So you're seeing I get to interact with their creative writing outside of the classroom, which is a great experience for me. So then I can approve all the students that submit. After they're approved, what's nice is it goes into the next step, which is voting. So what the students do is they'll vote on which of the pieces they think is best out of all the ones that I've approved. And they'll vote, and then the winning voter basically gets to have their chapter published, and then it moves on to the next chapter. So you can see all the students are really working together to create this collaborative story. And this next slide I'm showing you now is actually one of the best features when it comes to accountability. So I've already discussed why it's great for time. But as far as accountability goes, I can drag my mouse over any of the students, and I did over here over Stefan's name. And you could see that he wrote 2 entries and he voted 3 times. So I can track that. And I can tell my students, you will not get credit unless you write this number of entries and you vote this number of times. So it's really nice to be able to track their progress as they move through it. I also like how within this piece, you can not just do creative writing, I discovered as time went on, but you can also do nonfiction projects. You can have them do other assignments that they can work together on. So I really liked this site as far as, especially for creative writing, but it can also be tweaked to work with other projects as well. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and just one note, it is really constructed toward elementary level students. So there are some like really bright colors and rainbows that my high schoolers are like, what is going on? But what I really like about the site is I can work around that. They can kind of be amused by that, but you can still get, because of the system that's in place, really good creative writing done outside of the classroom and easily track the students while they do it. So I really enjoyed using the site.
And it seems like you were able to, do 2 things there, which is, one, you had a feature on Turnitin that you liked, which was the peer editing aspect. It doesn't seem to have had that voting, component though.
Exactly.
So even if you really like the peer editing part of Turnitin, it wasn't perfect for what you wanted there. So you could use Boomwriter. But let's say you just lost Turnitin because your school stopped paying for it. Now you've found something that, yeah, it's not the Cadillac of plagiarism checkers, but Boomwriter's still pretty good for that peer editing and, sharing of stories thing.
Definitely. And they were really excited to use it. And I think the engagement came from that voting process that you mentioned.
Good. I also just want to take a minute here and say we are getting tweets. So,
oh boy.
Yeah, we've got a lot here from Carolyn Hilarious. So please keep tweeting, and Joellen McCarthy and Heather Rocco. Like, if you guys have questions, we're, want to keep this kind of informal, and we'll just stop and answer your questions. So whatever you guys want to talk about, we'll kind of gear towards that. But I think the big thing that we're trying to move towards is just this process of finding the technology that works for what we want it to do. We're not letting the technology kind of tell us what to do. We're not saying like, oh, we bought Turnitin, now our school is forcing us to, do peer editing. We're not saying, oh, we have Boomwriter now we should do this. We're starting with what we want to do, and then we're finding the tech that does it for us. And too often it's kind of the reverse. Like, you get this new like glittery technology that the district has bought, and then it's like, okay, now I have to use that because someone's going to come check on me. But try and do it the other way. With Boomwriter, it's an app that's built for teachers, and there's a ton of things that are out there like that. The problem is, these things keep changing. So, I had a great app for, it wasn't collaborative, story writing or essay writing, but it was collaborative annotation, where students would essentially, in middle school, we would have them put Post-it notes in their books that they were reading, their independent reading books. And this would allow you to put Post-it notes basically electronically in everyone's book. So it was, you were reading the same book, and anytime you took a note, it would show up in everyone else's book, and you could have a conversation while reading. It was amazing. And then they started making you pay for it, which I was fine with. Like, it was so good, we would have paid, you know, a couple of bucks per kids that they wanted. But then they changed the whole thing because they realized that they could add in more features that we didn't need, that were involved, like math problems and workbooks and worksheets that we didn't need. And it just became a different thing. And too often, you know, that seems to be happening, where you're finding something that's great and it's free and it's built for teachers, and then they change it entirely. And, you know, what do you do next?
Yeah, I mean, even just to cut in here, Brian, because even with Boomwriter, I had to instruct my students to kind of step around to this $39.99 payment that it was explaining that to give extra services. And what I could already foresee, and we've seen this with so many educational sites in the past, I can already foresee this site starting to charge you for using it in your classroom, charging you for using it in your district, even charging you, as you were mentioning with that app that you were using, per student even. So I guess that's the major caveat of these educational sites and these educational apps. Once they hook you in, and once they have your loyalty, then come the fees. And if you're already really used to it, it's tough kind of to tear yourself away. And I know we had that experience in some ways with Jupiter grades, which we both still use and both love. But.
Yeah. We actually have a question now from Heather Rocco, which she says, can you talk about the access you have in classes? Do your students have Chromebooks, or is it bring your own device? So I can say for me, we're kind of all over the place now. I teach 2 classes that have iPads, 1 class that has Chromebooks. I have classes that are in computer labs, and then in other classes we have bring your own device. And I mean, I teach in Flushing, like in the middle of New York City. Everyone seems to have access to something. And none of these things that we're talking about are things that you need necessarily to do in class. So, you know, and in fact, part of the problem that we're describing, which is how they keep changing their free educational apps, I think what's happening is there's this big drive to make everything cross-platform. So everything has to work on your laptop, on your iPhone, and on your iPad. And in the process of doing that, you're actually losing features because it's not easy to make them all compatible. So you're kind of suffering because you might have been using it with Chromebooks, but then because they want it to work on smartphones, they're changing it. So that's kind of the point of what we're talking about. You can't get comfortable with anything. You can't be certain that, you know, okay, I bought everyone in the district an iPad and we found the perfect app. Then they're going to change it on you. They changed Google Drive. Like, it was so good 2 years ago for collaborative writing. In class, we had an app that was just called Google Drive, and kids would open the documents in that app. Then Google wanted to make it, you know, I don't know, I guess it was more profitable for them to have different apps. So you had to open a document in Drive, but then download the Docs app, and then move from the Drive app to the Docs app, and then back to the Drive app. It was just crazy. We still use Drive for lots of things, but it changes, and you've got to be able to do that. And I think just talking about Drive, like, can Drive do all the things you were trying to have it do for Turnitin and Boomwriter?
And I think in a lot of ways, Drive is such a great tool for collaborative writing for obvious reasons. You're sharing a document, and all the students can take part in that document and write different pieces of that document. However, the issue, and I know we've both run into this issue, when it comes to Google Drive, is that though you can track comments that are done, the comment tracking is not going to be as smooth a process as it is in both Turnitin and Boomwriter and some other sites. Yes, you can sort by timestamp and things like that, but you can't actually click on one individual student in Google Drive and see all the specific things that they've done to help create that document. So too often you're left with this final document that, you know, students have quote unquote edited right? But you don't know to what extent that editing has been done.
Right. Unless you have 30 hours to sit there and look at it, because it will timestamp it by like the millisecond almost. I mean, I know Google Apps for education and like Google Classroom is kind of trying to gear things more towards teachers. I tried it out last year, but it wasn't that advanced to me. I don't think it really tells you who's doing what on a collaborative document yet, at least in the way that Boomwriter does, where you could click on the account and you could see how many, votes they made and where they made edits. So Google Drive is great for creating a final product, but it's not necessarily great for showing you the process that the kids went through to, get there.
And I know, Brian, we always joke about the student who just puts a period, deletes space, and then it shows they've made all these edits to the document, but they've contributed nothing. They've just put a few spaces in.
Right. So if you have a smart kid, like if you're using Google Drive for collaboration, you have 5 kids attached to one document, and you tell them, I can check on Google Drive how many times you edited a document. You can do that, but if a kid just does one little thing, their record is there of having edited the document, and then you'd only know if you clicked on each one individually. So it's great, it's not ideal. And that's what all of this stuff is, great but not ideal. So let's keep going with our process. Let's say we don't have the Cadillac. Turnitin's not there for us, or it's not doing everything we want. Boomwriter is doing one thing, but it's not doing everything. Like, we're still kind of talking about the part of the writing where the actual writing is going on. And a lot of the group work goes on before there's anything formally being written. And that's the part where we really have to get involved in, where we have to be able to see, how are things being assigned? How are people with deadlines? If they're saying, all right, we need to research for 2 weeks, who's actually researching for 2 weeks and who's researching the night before or not at all? And how do we monitor and engage in that process? For high school students and secondary students, like, where is that happening? Like, where are they talking to each other?
And it's that planning process. It's that process that is so much more important as far as learning life skills than is that final product.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to find ways, not just to look at the dry final product, not just to look at these final products and say, okay, your whole group did a good job. But how do we look then at individual students, and from the planning aspect, how can we make sure they're actually meeting deadlines behind the scenes, make sure that they're talking to each other behind the scenes, who's taking the leadership role behind the scenes, who's just not doing anything behind the scenes? Is that possible?
I think at the secondary level, a lot of those conversations, once you move outside of class, are happening on Facebook. So kids create a group there that is just for their group. And we don't want to get in on that, like, you're not friending them on Facebook so you can be part of that group. But if you were, that's where you would see who's part of the planning conversation and who's not.
Yeah, I'm not ready to take the Facebook leap.
And not every kid's on Facebook.
True.
So like, I definitely have students who aren't on Facebook, and I don't know what happens then when the rest of the group is planning. So if we want to get involved in the process, we don't have the Cadillac, and there's no good education app out there for this. Because frankly, all right, Boomwriter sounds great, but there's a lot of made for education apps that are terrible. Like, I go to the App Store, you click on the education category, and what's there? It's junk. And or maybe it's not junk. It's good for 4-year-olds, or my 3-year-old. He's going to learn to read like any day now, because he's got all these apps that are like bunnies jumping at, I don't know, whatever's going on.
Count those bunnies.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, he's really going to know how to count, and that's great. Like, that's really good. But they don't break it down, or at least they haven't since I've looked at it last. So it's just all of these free apps that are called educational apps.
And it feels like these apps that are just really just rushed out there.
Yeah.
Just so they look fancy and are colorful, so that teachers think, oh, this says it meets a need that I have, so I'm going to go download it. And then you download it and you find it's it really does kind of a bad job at doing what you need it to do,
Right.
despite all the colors and all the bunnies, you know.
So, I mean, I think the big thing we need to be able to do is put those away. You know, we don't have Turnitin, we don't have Boom Writer. There's not other things we're finding that are created for educators. We don't need to be limited by apps that are for educators. So like we feel like, oh, if it's not for us, then we can't use it. The big thing is finding apps in other categories that do what we want them to do in our class that we can repurpose for the classroom. And I think that's, you know, really the major step.
And that's a step that nobody really thinks about, because I think it's so natural for teachers to say, I need a site or an app that will help in my classroom. And the immediate instinct is to search under the category of educational apps, because that just makes so much sense.
Right. I mean, if you're, like we were talking about before, like your debate coach,
Mm-hmm.
like what would you want them to do? You know, like there's not going to be a debate app, right?
There is one, but it just times. It's just a timer.
Right.
That says debate app on it. So everybody in debate has downloaded the debate app that is just essentially a timer. But is that really going to do anything that a stopwatch couldn't? No. So no, there aren't any explicitly debate apps that are excellent out there.
But if you got an app that was built for musicians that, you know, had something to do with recording yourself and playing with sound and hearing yourself and getting feedback on that, where you could, you know, record your speech, send it to other people, they could record comments. Like, are you allowed to use that even if it's for, you know, musicians?
And that's, yeah, no, I agree, because the music app, all it's doing then, this hypothetical music app, is it records noise.
Right.
Is that beneficial for a student who needs to work on their speech? Definitely. So that sounds a lot better than, say, what's out there specifically for debate. And it could be better even though it's under this category of music.
Right. So, you know, going back to our problem, you know, for writing, we want to be able to monitor this process of, you know, planning the writing. Drive can help us with the actual writing. And, you know, Boom Writer can do that, and Turnitin can do with the peer revision at the end of the writing. But what about the planning stages for the group? So now we're going to this third step where there aren't apps for educators out there. Turnitin can't do this. So I want to find something that is not going to involve me getting on Facebook and friending all these kids, because that's not going to go well for me. And I want to find something that will kind of recreate that social, you know, what do you call it, networking capability, but in a more controlled zone. So I'll just give you an example of something I did. Again, you know, this isn't the only thing out there, but it works pretty well. So this is something called Trello, and it's an app that is cross-platform. It works equally well on, you know, your laptop, your iPad, your iPhone, your whatever smart device you have. And what I like about it is you create a board, and this is what, you know, it looks like this. This is a board, and you can add members to the board. So it's only, you know, if there's 5 people in the group, 5 members join the board, and they can share it with you. And they create these columns that are for planning. So these are ones that I just kind of put in there for a hypothetical group. But let's say they're doing a research project, and, you know, Google Drive will be kind of messy for research. You're just adding one document with tons of notes, but you're not seeing who added what, and it's not necessarily going to be organized because it's just a word processor. So let's say we wanted to watch a group during the research process, and we had them create, you know, 2 columns within the board, one for this research topic and one for that research topic. And, you know, it essentially becomes that little index card box that you had in 6th grade, you know, before we were using computers really that much in classroom, where your teacher would have you write all of your research notes on index cards, 1 card at a time, and put it in this box, and then that leads to the writing process. Well, that was always kind of independent. This shares it with everybody. So you take all the notes together, add your notes to each card, and we see who's adding what, because it attaches a name to it. Whereas Drive hides the name of the editor, Trello will always tag a name and a timestamp on who added what. So like I'm envisioning here, I have the kids collecting notes together, breaking it down by topic, and maybe over here they're assigning people to do that. So they say, you know, student A, like John, you're gonna work on research topic 1, and student B is also on topic 1, and student C is on topic 2. But student D, what I want you to do is start trying to find some patterns across research topic 1 and 2 and fill them in over here. And the to-do list becomes this kind of running conversation. Did you do this yet? Did you do that yet? And they can respond, you know, in these comments, you know, did you get this part done yet? And we see that conversation happening live. And if someone's not part of that conversation, you know, that makes the accountability aspect that much better, because you can see it right here. And in the menu, you know, you can click on each person and you can see their activity. So you can see everything that they added, every comment that they made. And if someone's adding nothing, you just click on the name and you'll see nothing. But more than just the whole gotcha aspect is the ability to see this process live and say, well, okay, maybe you guys did really good at setting tasks for yourself, but I can tell by the timestamps that your time management is off. Like, you're trying to do too much at once because you saved it for the last minute. So how about we do the research for this amount of days, and then we spend a whole day on synthesis. So they can get this app on their laptop, but if they're, you know, at the library and they don't have their laptop and they've just got an iPhone, they can go right to the iPhone and it looks exactly like this. You just swipe through the columns on the iPhone. And, you know, I find that it works much better than exclusively using Google Drive or something else.
I mean, yeah, just looking at that, it's like you were saying, the index card box from 6th grade. But think about how great the timing is for that, because they can take that home with them. It's not like one student has it in their possession.
Right.
All of them have it if they have access to the internet. And I think what I like even better than kind of the collective box that you were bringing up is that you can hold them so accountable for every part of the planning process, which is something in all the other things we've looked at today, we have not been able to do. I mean, and that last point you made about their time management skills, I mean, how else are you going to be able to get that great information?
Right. And, you know, the key point here is that app is not an education app. You know, that is not made for educators. It is not currently used by any educators I know. It was just me thinking, all right, what do I need them to do? I need to be able to see this process, and what's going to do that for me? So I just started looking into other areas, and that is an app for project management that businesses use. And there are tons of project management apps out there, and some of them are, you know, you have to pay for them, and some of them are like free trials, and some of them have only basic, you know, amenities or whatever we call it that you can use at a time, and then they make you pay for it. Right now, Trello is working for me. I can get a free version of it that does whatever I need it to do. And maybe in a year, they're going to start, you know, charging me $50 a person to use it. Who knows? But I think the mentality is, oh no, I'm done for. Like, Trello was so great, it did everything. Now I'll never do this again. Like how can I live without all of these things that I'm so used to? And, you know, I don't know what it was like, because we only started teaching, you know, 2008 now. I don't know what it was like when you didn't have all of this stuff, but I think it probably was more like that, where you had these things that you were set on, which is maybe the textbook. And today it just doesn't exist anymore. Like, you're never going to have that thing that's going to be there for you always, because it's a new marketing game, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the lesson then is to just as everything's always adapting around you as a teacher, you have to be adaptable. And I think that's something that we know, we already kind of know as teachers,
Right.
but sometimes we forget that we get caught up in searching education apps for things we need. We get too discouraged when the apps don't do exactly what they want. We wish we had apps that would do what we need them to do. When those things are out there, if you're creative about it, and you're willing to think outside the box. And in your case, I really like that example of looking into a business productivity app.
Right.
And it really did exactly what you needed it to do. And I think
Right.
just as a general principle, that process of being creative about the way you solve the issues that you will inevitably deal with in the classroom is just something that anybody in any classroom or that teaches any extracurricular club can definitely use.
Right. And, I think you're doing two things at once, which is you're getting your classwork done, but you're also proving to them what you keep saying, which is this happens in the real world. So it's like if you give them this app that businesses are using right now for collaboration and to get things done, you're not playing this pretend game of group work where it's like we're in the little sandbox where you all get to play as if you're real people who are doing real people things. You can say, no, like you're using the tools of the workplace right now. And yeah, you're doing it for what we want you to do, but this is a real thing that happens.
And like, and anytime I tell my students that this is something that will be done post-college, in the working world, it lights up in their eyes. It's something that
Right.
they get really excited about because they see the application of it. And when students can see the application of things, it just gets them that much more engaged in it. And I think you're right. So
Yeah.
the productivity, if you prove it, that's true.
Right.
So the productivity is good in that way too, then. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off.
No, it's okay. I think, there's like a fine line though, because we always throw out that you need to do this in the workplace, like you will have group work in the future. So you have to get used to it. Well, you're also going to have group work in the future where you can't rely on everybody, like that's part of reality too. And we try and hide those realities. So if we say like, look, you don't like group work, we're trying to teach you how to get everyone on board, because you will face that same problem in the real world. You will face the problem of like, I've got 3 members on my team and, one just isn't there helping out. Well, how do you make him more accountability if you're that project leader in the business world?
Mm-hmm.
And now you're showing them, I figured out ways to hold you accountable. You can figure out ways to hold other people accountable with you.
Yeah, and I think this is something that we've always tried to do, but I'm happy that since we've had this talk, I've tried to be more conscious of it. And as both of us help out our respective schools with technology, and people are always coming up to us and saying, how do I do this? How do I do that? But the reality is we're not geniuses.
Right.
We don't know how to code anything, right?
Yeah.
What we know is how to use Google as a search engine and Twitter as a source to help us learn about problem solving.
Right.
And if everybody could adapt to that mentality that we've been kind of talking about today, I think it could make just you so much more of a stronger teacher.
Yeah. And I think, I think it's Bill Gates who said like, he'll hire a lazy person because a lazy person will figure out how to do something faster than somebody else. And not to say we're lazy, but I think that's kind of part of it, which is like we're from this computer generation where we're used to saying like, okay, I have this computer in front of me and I could get up to do something, but I'm pretty sure that I can figure out a way to get the computer to do it for me first. So I could make 10,000 copies at the copy machine and it's going to break down and I'm going to like punch it a lot of times by the time it's over. But I could probably get all of these handouts to kids through the internet somehow. So let me figure out how to do that first.
All right. So I hate to cut us off here, Brian, but because it's been very fun.
Yeah.
But did you see any other questions you wanted to take, or do you want to tie this up?
No, I think we can tie it up. I mean, I think if we just sum it up, it's, hopefully we've given you a lot of tips for things that you can use for collaborative writing. Use Turnitin as a peer editor, not just as a plagiarism checker. Check out Boomwriter. Check out Trello. But it's not just, oh, we gave you these things, use them. It's more this process. If your school has access to really expensive software, get it to do the most it can possibly do. Don't just do what the school thinks it does or the only thing it can do. If you don't have that, there's always something out there that's doing it for you for free. It might not be as good, but it'll be pretty good. And if it's not doing everything, break down what you need to get done into small parts and find things outside of the education world to do it for you.
Great.
About it.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian. It's been a great talk. I always enjoy these discussions. And what I want to do now that we've kind of closed up is I just want to share with you quickly the sessions that are coming up in session 4. So for session 4, you can see workshop number 15 has reading strategies for purposeful instruction for developing skilled readers. We have session 16, helping kids to be kinder and more compassionate. Workshop number 17, connecting language literacy in the natural world with young English learners, and workshop 18, the power of strategic partnerships. And of course, don't forget to join everyone for the closing session. And finally, this has all been free today, and we've really enjoyed doing it for you. But if you want to take a couple bucks that you would have spent elsewhere during a typical workshop and donate it to Book Love Foundation, you can either go to their website, or you can go through EdCollab website and donate to them. So thank you so much. Finally, if you would like to just track what's been going on today, I know there's so many great sessions going on. Unfortunately, you can't be everywhere at once. Well, that's why this EdCollab gathering is so great, because all of these presentations are archived on gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com. So you can check those out later at your convenience, and also follow along with all the excitement by following the hashtag #TheEdCollabGathering. Thank you so much for stopping by and talking with us, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future. Have a great day.